Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and we are at the Design Spark Innovation Center here in sunny College Station, Texas, home of the Aggies. And I have a special guest today, although he is a Longhorn, so he may feel a little discomfort being in so much maroon, but your tie is maroon.
My tie is maroon, and I will admit, College Station, Texas is beautiful.
Wow, you may never be able to go back to Austin after that one.
I know, it's going to be tough.
So we've got a friend of the show, Dr. Daryl Henson, superintendent from Marlin ISD, and wanted to ask you, what's going on in your world? What's new?
So what's new in the world, in addition to Marlin ISD, I am now a proud professor of practice at the Baylor University, Sick'em Bears.
So what you're saying is your loyalty is dependent, it's beautiful here, you're going to be with Baylor,
I am a proud Longhorn through and through.
I got you.
Everyone knows I bleed burnt orange, but the Baylor School of Education is the tops in the country. So the opportunity to join the faculty at Baylor is just a blessing, and it's a phenomenal opportunity to impact our future leaders of education.
Now, have you got to the point of which courses you're going to be teaching and then how you're going to design? Have you thought through how am I going to make it happen?
I have thought that through. So the first course I'm teaching this summer is called the Superintendency. And I really want to make sure, are you sure you want me to teach that course? And they said, yeah. So it's a seminar course, EDL 6350,
okay.
The Superintendency.
Now, you're going to make them have like 7 people in there that's going to be the bosses, so they get a feel. No, I'm joking.
I'm trying to make it as real as possible. And we know that as a superintendent,
right,
communication is highly important.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a lot about not just writing papers, but can you present information? And ultimately, can you get constituents to buy in to what it is you're speaking about, from curriculum to concrete?
Now, that brings us to our topic today, which is obviously a very hard topic to talk about. I think everyone is aware of the tragedy in Uvalde.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like it's something that I want to get your insight and your feedback, because superintendents, this is, our worst fear, right? It's a parent's worst fear. It's our community's worst fear. And for whatever reason, it keeps happening. And but we've got to talk about it. We've got to address the questions, the hard questions, and we've got to reassure that our communities that we're working towards solutions with what we can control, right? And that's
Correct.
a big caveat of what's the span of our control to make our campuses and our districts as safe as absolutely possible. But I think the first part I want to get your take is, when something like that happens to a friend and a neighbor, even if it's not Texas, it hits all of us because it's a school and it's kids. How do you react and internalize, and then maybe a little bit on how your staff, internalize it, what it means to them, and the conversations that are probably going on inside the buildings?
So to really speak about this current situation in Uvalde, it hit home and it still hurts to this day.
Yeah.
And in a way, I do want for it to hurt and impact all educators, all lawmakers, all community members for the foreseeable future. There is a natural fear of, when I come to work, when I come to school, when I come to learn, am I going to make it back home to see my family? And there's layers of issues that people could talk about to say is the cause. But ultimately, despite the cause, there is still a natural level of anxiety and fear of our children when our goal is to educate and teach them what's also going on in the back of their mind, like, am I going to make it out of second period? Am I going to make it to the bus ride home?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because I think in Texas and across the country, these past few years, COVID, the political landscape of the country and what goes on in some boardrooms, just because there's such disagreement with how we do things, I think that anxiety is a little bit heightened. And having contact with districts across the country, the common theme has been educators are leaving the profession, right?
Yes.
For a variety of reasons. And I would hate to think that we're at a point where, my wife's an educator. Can she feel secure going to campus, right? My kid's going to school, your staff, your faculty, you worry about them because those are your family. You know this just as well as anybody. We spend more time with
We
our
do.
folks at school than we do with our own
Our
family.
faculty, staff, students, everyone.
Absolutely. You know, generally, and I don't know what your experience is. Generally, we've approached this with looking at, all right, something happens, and then we react by looking at the building, reviewing the security
Yes.
cameras. What can we make more secure, less entries, more entries, all of those different things. And I want to get your take. What's been your experiences of trying to mitigate these things throughout your career?
And you hit it right on the head, and it's kind of sad. We are very reactionary.
Yeah.
We wait till something happens, and then it will awaken us. But my experience has been just that: checking doors, talking to staff, community members. Can we put together quickly a safety committee
Yeah.
to verify access points and cameras? Let's have this 2-second talk around mental health. So it's been reactionary, but in all honesty, it hasn't gone on longer than the whole buzz has sustained. And I
Right.
think now in 2022, we have to be at a point to where we just don't react to what happened. We actually demand and implement changes that we can see happen to keep our children and our staff not safe, but alive.
Yeah, I think you hit on some good points about what are the actions, right? Because all the community, excuse me, the committees and the discussions, while valuable, they're meaningless if there's no action behind them. Because you've got kids at stake, you've got staff members at stake, you've got the really part of the American dream, a free public education
Correct.
where your kids can go to school. And I want to point something out from our lens, and I know superintendents can't say it, but since I'm no longer in the seat, I can say it a little bit more now. Is we are constantly fighting the battle of two sides of the coin, right? I mean, you've got schools that are the hub of your community, which you need parents to have access to, and you want to be inviting and friendly. And so there's always that double-edged sword as well. Well, we can lock everything down, and kids can stay in the building, and no one
Yes.
can get in, and maybe people will buy into that for a short amount of time. But you tell parents that they can't come eat lunch, or they can't come, or even if it's going to be inconvenience, there's going to be longer lines, or we have to do a particular badging system. It's very hard for us because our campuses take a lot of the stress of having to explain and having
Yes.
to deal with the parents when they don't get what they want, access to their kids, or there's longer waits or what have you. So I feel for you because I know those decisions have to be made, and you have to figure out how do we do this but still maintain the environment, the atmosphere that we want when parents come to the schools. So
And those are very difficult decisions to make. And that's why it can't be a one size
yeah,
fits all approach.
yeah,
It does have to be driven by the values of the community. So, as we're thinking about ways to ensure, not hope, but ensure that we keep our students and our staff safe, let's bring in parents, let's bring in principals, let's bring in school board members, ex school board members to talk about here in school district ABC or here in Marlin, Texas, and Marlin ISD, how can we still allow what we have done in terms of that open field while ensuring the safety of our students, staff, and their families?
yeah. And you hit on the nail on the head, which is hard to do, right? Each community is different
Yes.
and has a different set of what they believe is best for the kids. I think you articulate it very well, where just because Marlin has this set of values and norms and what they want to see, you know, 30 miles down the road may be a little bit different, and so getting our legislators and our people that make the decisions to understand, if you're going to just blanket everything, you're probably missing out on 50% of the population because they're not going to agree with that, or that's not going to be right for their community. I think that engaging our communities, but also bringing in the outside entities to help build the process. Our local law enforcement and our other entities that do this on a regular basis.
You're right.
We were in Houston ISD, and we had three officers at the high school, right? I mean, and those folks were part of the team, part of the
Yes.
family. We relied on them, and there's times where like, man, how do I feel about having three officers on the campus? Does that give me reassurance, or does it give me pause?
And so I spoke about that the other week here in Marlin, we actually approved the hiring of another police officer. But if we're being honest, and I've been very outspoken about what's taking place in Uvalde, is that actually going to be a solution, or is it going to just give the optics of safety?
Right.
And I want to make sure that I'm coming up with solutions that are going to maintain the safety of all of our facilities. And so by adding an additional officer, right now, we do believe as a community that that is going to keep us safer, but that's only the beginning. Do they understand their roles? Do we have an actual plan in place that they're a part of to help implement? But you did speak about involving the local law enforcement and other experts. We have to lean on their knowledge and their wisdom from various security partners and partnerships that can help us. Because as educators, we're curriculum people.
Right.
If you ask me how to plan a PTA meeting, I got you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to making a very detailed safety plan, I have to lean on the wisdom of others.
Right.
The Bible says, lean not to your own understanding.
Oh.
So in this one, I'm not
Went there.
going to.
You went there.
I went there.
Yeah.
I love the Lord. And so I have to make sure that I have to lean on the wisdom and guidance of other local experts to help keep Marlin ISD, and ultimately, let's keep all of our schools across the country safe.
You know, you bring up a great point about our school resource officers. There's always been this little gray area, right? How involved are they with the schools? Depending upon, technically has a crime been committed, or do
Yes.
we need some guidance, some help with students? And I know that sometimes puts them in a difficult position. But the best ones I've always felt are the ones that, hey, they're not just there as if a crime happens. They're a mentor, a guide, a deterrent because of the help and the wisdom that they give to our kids as well. Been fortunate to have school resource officers that interact with the kids and do that. But I've had some other ones that, like, it's a hands-off approach, and if unless a law has been broken, I'm not going to be involved. So I think that needs to be discussed to some degree, because our officers, knowing our kids as intimately as our teachers know our kids, I think is important, and I think can help with identifying potential risks and threats, or if kids need help, or if we need certain resources for mental health. Our kids are struggling, because they work with adults that are struggling all the time out there
correct.
on the streets, right? So, what questions do you think we should be asking? When this happened, and you go into, several thoughts of just pain, and you're disgusted, you're angry, you're hurt for those families and that community. And then I always think about, what should we be asking?
So I was extremely angry. I started my career as a fourth grade teacher in Austin ISD. And so looking at those children's faces, it was a different pain point for me. And of course, the first question you ask is, why would someone, a monster, go into a school building and harm and kill children and teachers? Then, of course, we begin to think logistically. How did it happen?
Right.
What was open? What was available? How did he purchase the gun? Is the gun the issue? What was going through his mind? Of course, he's 18 years old, so where are his parents? How did his parents not know?
Sure.
You just start firing off all these tentacles of all these questions. But whenever we're having these talks with our peers, we have to always remind them, everyone didn't grow up like you.
Right.
Didn't grow up like me. Didn't grow up like this person right here. So it's just not, well, my mother would have stopped, or I would have done this. Well, your parents aren't the monster's parents, and you aren't the monster. And I'm going to call him the monster. Okay. There's no other way to refer to him. He's not a person. He's not a human. And I understand that there may have been some mental health issues, but I'll say this on the record. If you harm children and you kill children and you kill adults, frankly, I don't care what's going on. You're a monster in my book. However, I do believe that there has to be some sort of grace and mercy before you get to that monster level with monster actions to step in and intervene and help. But all the whys, hows, the wins, all that went through my head.
We've always been charged with educating students. It feels like that even more than 2 years ago, we have to be the provider of mental health, social interaction,
Yes.
mentorship, de facto parents, really and truly. And I don't know whether that's fair to teachers, to administrators. I don't know if it's, hey, we know that going into the profession. So it's one of those things where, hey, you're signing up for this to some degree,
That's
right?
tough, Doc.
I know.
It's tough, but we signed up for it. We have to educate based on the current day and age. And so in 2022, if it calls to be a de facto parent, if it calls to be a counselor, a barber, a coach, or whatever, teachers have to step up to the plate. And not just teachers. I use that word to mean all educators.
Right.
I'm still a teacher. The principals, we have to step up and make sure that we're giving children what they need in this day and age.
We started the show with talking about, an opportunity, a great opportunity for you to influence the next round of leadership with Baylor. Any thoughts on curriculum and where our teacher preparation starts at, where our administrator preparation, where that needs to start, or what needs to be infused to make it more holistic about what we're being asked to do? And I think there may be a need to revisit, hey, pedagogy is great, right? But there are all these other things that we're asking folks to do, and are we truly equipping them when we get a kid in college?
Because pedagogy and knowing how to find the slope of a line is not enough for our children.
Right.
And so to kind of answer your question, whenever I'm hiring a teacher or any employee, I check for three things and three things only. One is, do you have tenacity?
Okay.
Because people talk about passion, but passion can go home at 4 p.m. But if you're tenacious, you will burn the midnight oil. The next thing is, do you have a will to win? You have to want to win and be successful in the classroom. You have to want for the children to be successful, whether they play the flute or they play football, they're playing a game of jacks. But probably most importantly, which I'm starting to see kind of phase out, honestly, is, do you have a heart for children? If you have a heart for children, like true children, everything that we talked about, being a de facto parent, being that mentor, being that model, that'll come naturally. So when it comes to certain curriculum sort of things, we have to make sure that we're talking about meeting the needs of children, person to person, human to human, adult to child.
How do we, I feel like at times, especially on social media, we talk out of both sides of our mouths for the reason of this. Is on one hand, we're expressing the need for teachers to decompress and to back away and to give them their own mental health downtime, so to speak. But on the other hand, and I'm guilty of it, is all get out, right? When there's a need and there's something going on with a kid, like we don't go home, right? This is what we signed up for, right? There, the phone doesn't go off. It is what it is. How do you go about balancing those two components where, hey, it's whatever needs to happen and we got to get done versus I got to get a gauge from my staff and how they're going through it,
It's difficult. And I believe that there's no balance to greatness.
No, we're of the same mind. And I got to share this story. Every mentor, leader that I respect has always said, you've got to have balance. And I've said it to a couple that I said, where's your balance at? I have yet to see someone who's excelling in what they do to have a balance of tell me that example and where you can look behind the curtains and see.
And so I don't know one. And that's why we could look at, how do we recruit certain teachers who understand? So, Rick, this. We probably worked, 80, 100 hours a week.
Oh, yeah.
But it felt fine. It didn't overwhelm because our heart was there.
Right.
So if we find those educators who understand that they're here to give it their all, you will naturally find that balance per se. You will naturally find that downtime. Now, I'm not saying you work 24/7 for a school district.
Right.
However, it comes to the educators that we're putting into the classroom. Not saying that there's a major problem. But then, okay, well, how do we get to the point of finding educators who understand that notion of that strong heart? It probably goes back to starting right now while they're currently in school at 14, at 12, at 9, in their experience. If a child has a positive experience in school right now, it's going to be very little that'll want to stop them from staying in the school system and giving back. But we have to make sure that we're paying our teachers. I don't want to get in a whole talk about teacher compensation.
Oh, yeah.
But if inflation is going up right now, 9, 10, 11, 12%, but then we might give you a 2 or 3% raise,
Yeah.
you can't even afford to live.
And then medical, right? TRS medical, like you're always taking a loss, it feels like, by the time all that is calculated.
Correct. So that's a whole another episode on definitely how to address that. So I can say honestly, I don't know.
Yep. It's funny you mentioned the incentives. Been looking at across the country how school districts are doing, because Texas isn't the only one with teacher exodus, right? A lot of school districts, and some things we're helping school districts do, is that teacher student living, right? If you don't have a huge general fund to make sure that they're getting paid to combat inflation. Okay, what else can you do to help take some of the cost, some of the burden out of their day-to-day lives? So some very innovative student teacher housing of all makeups, right? So I think that's going to be more at play. I know a lot of rural districts have used that in the past to entice teachers. Leadership opportunities quicker, where there's always kind of been you got to pay your dues and be in the system for quite some time before you get that opportunity. I don't know that I've always agreed with that. I think some talent speaks loudest, in my opinion, and you want the best in front of your teachers and the best leaders that you can possibly find the quickest, in my opinion. But
and it goes to that, just keeping the best in the system.
Yeah.
And if the best are in the system, they're working with children to hopefully prevent certain things from happening.
Where do you think we go from here? So, and not necessarily as a state or country, but in terms of superintendents, where do we go? What are our next moves, our next actions to prepare for the fall, knowing that this is going to be a constant worry for our staff?
We have to have, first and foremost, an open ear and an open heart to truly hear the concerns and fears of our community, of our faculty and staff, and of our students. Then and only then can we do our famous approach to making plans on chart paper and in Excel spreadsheets.
Right.
So I am going to take the opportunity to just sit and listen, and then make sure that I truly put together committees of decision makers and of vocal leaders to work on what we feel is the Marlin ISD plan to keep our children and our faculty not safe but alive.
Now, we talked offline about you've got some local entities that are going to be partnering with the school district. So you're getting kind of a multi-tiered type of task force together, which I think is very wise and probably the best approach, right? Everybody working in the community on the same page of how things happen. Can you speak to that at all, or is that still in the works? I don't put you on the spot there.
It's definitely still in the works, but working with our City of Marlin Police Department, our Falls County Sheriff Office, and then just trying to find the other appropriate partners that the board and community feel comfortable with bringing to the table.
Sure.
Because we have to be very efficient in this.
Sure.
We don't want to wait too long to come out with the plan, because whenever COVID happened, all of us had plans, return to learns. They were so cute and graphic and all these things. But I'm taking this very serious. Not only are we going to focus in on instruction, we have to have that same level of detail for plans of safety and security.
What would you we talked a little bit about HR, and that is another episode that I'd love to get your perspective on, because we've probably got to change how we're going about the recruiting. You being a former athlete, and
yes, sir.
And I like a little bit of their approach, right? It's like, hey, you got to go find them and get them and bring them home. So, but for new teachers that are about to graduate this summer or early in the fall, what should we be messaging to them about coming on board if they're seeing some of these things in the news?
The main thing to them now is the overall importance of their role as a teacher.
Right.
You see it every single day, of the individuals who didn't have the greatest school experience, whether they dropped out or they didn't continue on to anything, the hard and difficult life that those individuals live. And as a teacher, you have the power to change the trajectory of individuals' lives, hundreds, if not thousands. And so, as a new teacher, really embrace that obligation, embrace that power. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Yeah.
And I believe that all educators wear crowns because the impact, and it's said and it sounds cute, but the true impact that you have or that you could have on a student's life sometimes can't be measured. So I encourage you to not give up, but to also be vocal and work with your school board, work with your principal, work with your superintendent to address any concerns that you might have, because they are leaving the profession in droves.
There's no doubt. There is no doubt about that. And I'm it gives me pause to think about some districts not being able to staff for next year, like literally having to shut down schools not because the school's too old or there's not a need or there's not enough kids, but we don't have the staff to.
I'm teaching 6th grade math next year.
There you go.
My entire cabinet and central office were all going back into the classroom because there were various staffing holes that we had.
You need me to just post up at central office and
Come on.
and pick up the walkie?
Yeah, come on. Dr. Fernandez, come back, please. We need that. Come on.
Hey, those are some of the, like you said it, when we're working those hours in Houston, some of the toughest, but some of the most rewarding times. Because you knew everything that you did and every decision that you made had impact.
Yes.
Even when you made a bad decision or one that you wanted to take back, right? But it had impact. Everything that you did for a student had impact, and for that family. It's hard to capture that, and I look very fondly on the times that we spent in Houston. So